It's almost a reflex these days, isn't it? You see a big news story, a complex event, and there's this immediate undercurrent, a sort of whisper of something else going on beneath the surface. It feels like we're all trying to decipher some hidden code sometimes.
That's a really keen observation. And it's precisely that impulse, that desire to understand the why behind the what, especially when things feel chaotic or just unclear. That's really the bedrock of what we're exploring today.
Right. So for this deep dive, we're tackling well, the fascinating and sometimes, frankly, unsettling world of conspiracy theories. We've got some really insightful material here that dissects the psychological pull, the social dynamics, and the cultural anxieties that seem to fuel these narratives and give them such staying power.
Yeah, and what's particularly valuable about this exploration, I think, is that it offers us a sort of distilled understanding, why these theories resonate so deeply with people. We can maybe cut through some of the noise and identify the core human needs and societal factors really at play.
Yeah, our sources really dig into those fundamental reasons, don't they? Why we're drawn to these kinds of explanations, how the internet has completely supercharged their spread, and they even lay out some really pertinent examples from, well, right now.
Exactly. Our aim today really is to get to grips with the engine driving these conspiracy theories, to understand why they find such fertile ground in a world that often feels so unpredictable. By the end of our discussion, listeners should hopefully have a much clearer lens to view this whole phenomenon through.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning then. What is it about conspiracy theories that hooks us in the first place? What's that central kind of irresistible draw?
Well, at their heart, conspiracy theories offer a sense of order in what seems like a disordered world. When events are complex, unsettling, these theories provide explanations that seem clear, coherent, often by attributing things to the intentional actions of secret groups. It suggests there's a hidden hand at work, implying that nothing is truly random.
It's almost like our brains are just hardwired to find patterns, right? Even if the pattern we think we see isn't actually, well, there. And a really significant piece of this puzzle seems to be a fundamental lack of trust in established institutions.
Oh, that's absolutely pivotal. The material really underscores how a decline in trust, whether it's in governments, corporations, the mainstream media, even scientific bodies, it creates this vacuum.
Yeah.
And alternative explanations just rush in to fill it. I mean, think back to Edward Snowden's revelations about the NSA. That showed very real, undisclosed activities by a powerful institution.
Right, or the fallout from the 2008 financial crisis. For so many people, it felt like the official stories, the narratives, just downplayed the scale of the deception and, frankly, mismanagement.
Precisely. And when those pillars of trust start to wobble, people naturally become more receptive to narratives suggesting deeper hidden truths are out there. The persistent belief, for example, in government secrecy around, say, extraterrestrial life is another manifestation of this feeling that key information is being deliberately kept from us.
And it feels like the constant flood of information online. And often, let's be honest, misinformation just amplifies that underlying skepticism, doesn't it?
Exactly. The digital age has created an environment where unverified claims can spread with incredible speed. And when you have competing, contradictory narratives flying around, particularly during a crisis like the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, it just breeds suspicion. It makes people more inclined to embrace these conspiratorial explanations for what's happening.
Now, something that strikes me as particularly interesting is how these theories simplify really complex issues. In a world that often feels overwhelming, they offer a much more, well, digestible story.
That's a crucial aspect of their appeal, definitely. Think about something like climate change. It's so multifaceted, this intricate web of causes and consequences. Now, contrast that with a theory that says extreme weather events are caused by a secret government weather control program. It's a far simpler narrative, right? Even if it has no basis in reality.
And in those moments of genuine uncertainty, that simplicity must feel incredibly comforting. It gives you a sense of knowing, even if it's, a false knowing, in a world that feels increasingly unpredictable.
Precisely. Then we need to look at the psychological factors at play. It's not solely about external events. Our own cognitive wiring, our own brains make us susceptible to these kinds of beliefs.
Like those mental shortcuts we all take, confirmation bias, for instance.
Yeah.
That's a big one, right?
Exactly. Huge one. If someone already holds a, let's say, skeptical view of pharmaceutical companies, they are far more likely to seek out and give weight to information that reinforces that skepticism. Even if the evidence is really flimsy, that's confirmation bias right there. And then you have the availability heuristic, those vivid, emotionally charged stories about, say, negative vaccine side effects. They can become disproportionately influential in shaping someone's perception of risk, even if statistically they're incredibly rare.
So the stories that really stick with us emotionally can sometimes outweigh the cold, hard data. And the material also mentions the human need for control. That one resonates deeply, I think.
It really does. When people feel a lack of agency, a lack of control in their own lives, believing in a larger conspiracy can, paradoxically, offer a sense of empowerment. The idea that some clandestine group is manipulating events, while unsettling, at least suggests there is a discernible cause. And understanding that cause can feel like regaining some control, or at least insight, that others lack.
It's almost a way of feeling like you're in on the secret, isn't it? Even if that secret is completely made up.
Ah.
And finally, there's this fundamental human drive we all have to find meaning, especially when faced with tragedy or events that just seem inexplicable.
Oh, that's a very powerful motivator. When we're confronted with randomness or profound loss, we naturally strive to build a narrative that gives it purpose or reason. The assassination of JFK is such a classic example. The idea of just a lone gunman often felt insufficient to explain such a massive event. That led to this huge proliferation of alternative theories, all seeking a bigger, more meaningful explanation. Conspiracy theories, in that sense, offer a grander narrative. They offer purpose.
Okay, so we're starting to get a handle on why these theories have such a grip. Now let's shift gears and look at how the digital age has just transformed their reach and their impact. I mean, it feels like the internet and social media have fundamentally altered the entire landscape.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. The internet has essentially democratized information dissemination, for better or worse. It's taken conspiracy theories from the fringes and really thrust them into the mainstream in ways that were just unimaginable before.
And a huge part of that is just the sheer speed and scale, right? The way these ideas can propagate now.
Precisely. Platforms like X, YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, they enable these theories to spread with astonishing speed, reaching enormous audiences almost instantly. And crucially, they often bypass the traditional journalistic gatekeepers who would normally vet these kinds of claims.
And those algorithms that power these platforms, my understanding is they can actually, maybe inadvertently, amplify this sensational or emotionally charged content, which, let's face it, many conspiracy theories are by their very nature.
That's a really significant factor. Algorithms are often designed to maximize user engagement, right? And content that evokes strong emotions or presents really controversial viewpoints tends to be highly engaging. The source highlights that 2020 video falsely linking 5G tech to COVID-19 as a prime example. Its sensational nature just propelled it to viral status despite having zero factual basis.
And just the sheer volume of information out there online. While it offers amazing opportunities for learning, it also makes it incredibly challenging for people to figure out what's credible and what's not.
Exactly. While the internet provides this wealth of knowledge, it also demands a really high degree of critical thinking skill to navigate effectively. People can easily fall down these rabbit holes, encountering just a barrage of information that confirms their existing biases without necessarily having the tools to evaluate its reliability. Online forums, like the Conspiracy subreddit mentioned in the material, can become these incredibly powerful echo chambers where beliefs are just constantly reinforced by a like-minded community.
Yeah, you get into those spaces and it's like everyone is speaking the same language, reinforcing each other's worldview. It must create a very strong sense of shared reality,
Right.
however skewed that reality might be.
It absolutely does. And this brings us to another critical aspect, the formation of these online communities around shared beliefs.
Mhm.
These communities provide a really powerful sense of belonging and validation.
That makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
If you feel like you possess some unique understanding of the truth that goes against the grain, finding others who share that must be incredibly validating. It must provide a really strong sense of connection.
Precisely. Especially for people who might feel isolated or marginalized in their offline lives. These online communities can function like a virtual tribe. They offer a space where they feel accepted, understood. The QAnon movement is a really compelling, if extreme, example of this sprawling online network built on shared interpretations of cryptic messages, fostering a deep sense of community and shared purpose among followers.
So it's not just about the intellectual appeal of the theory itself. It's very much about the social bonds that form around it. But as the material points out, this sense of community can have a darker side too.
Indeed. While these communities offer support and identity, their insular nature can also make members increasingly resistant to any contradictory evidence or alternative perspectives. The persistence of the QAnon movement, even when faced with numerous debunked predictions, really illustrates this. The strong social bonds within the group often override any external evidence that challenges their core beliefs. It becomes an us versus them mentality.
And then we have the role of social media influencers and content creators. It seems like almost anyone with a significant online presence can become a conduit for these ideas,
Yeah.
regardless of their actual expertise or whether the claims are true or not.
That's a really significant dynamic now, whether they're motivated by a desire for attention or financial gain, or maybe even genuine, though perhaps misguided, belief. Social media influencers and content creators can act as incredibly powerful amplifiers for conspiracy theories. When someone with a large, engaged following endorses a particular idea, it just lends it this veneer of credibility in the eyes of their audience.
Even if that credibility is totally unfounded.
Yeah.
The source mentions the resurgence of flat earth theories back in 2023, driven partly by these charismatic influencers who created compelling, though scientifically wrong, content.
Exactly. People who are just good communicators who can craft engaging narratives can be incredibly persuasive, even when they're promoting ideas that are easily disproven by established facts.
Okay, let's pivot slightly now and explore how conspiracy theories often tap into these deeper cultural anxieties. They don't seem to just appear out of nowhere. They often reflect broader societal concerns, right?
That's a very astute point. Conspiracy theories often act as a kind of cultural seismograph, registering the underlying fears and anxieties that are prevalent in society at any given time. The material draws a really compelling parallel between, say, the Cold War paranoia of the 1950s and our contemporary anxieties around things like technological advancement, globalization, and growing economic inequality.
So while the specific conspiracies might change over time, the underlying anxieties they latch onto seem relatively consistent. And a huge one right now seems to be this pervasive fear of losing control.
Precisely.
Okay.
So many contemporary conspiracy theories center on this anxiety about powerful entities, could be governments, big tech corporations, global organizations wielding excessive control over our lives, our freedoms. The Great Reset theory, which really gained traction during the COVID-19 pandemic, is a perfect example. It posited this hidden agenda to establish a kind of totalitarian global order.
Mm-hmm. And those theories about microchips being secretly put into vaccines, that's such a potent example of anxieties around surveillance and the erosion of bodily autonomy, especially in an age of increasingly intrusive tech.
Exactly. Then there's the growing skepticism towards science and established expertise, which is somewhat paradoxical, isn't it, given how much we rely on technology and scientific understanding.
It's almost as if the more complex science and technology become, the more some individuals push back against the authority of the experts. Is that fair?
I think that's often the case. The source highlights anti-vaccine conspiracy theories as a key example here. Medical professionals, scientific consensus, they're viewed with suspicion, often portrayed as being somehow beholden to the interests of big pharma. And tragically, historical events, real abuses like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, have created this lingering legacy of distrust that these theories can unfortunately exploit.
And then you have the really significant impact of economic and social factors. It just makes intuitive sense that when people are facing economic hardship or feel increasingly disconnected from mainstream society,
Yeah.
they might be more receptive to alternative explanations for why they're struggling.
Absolutely. When traditional social structures seem to weaken and economic gaps widen, people often look for alternative frameworks to understand their place in the world and the reasons for their difficulties. Theories about a clandestine globalist elite manipulating wealth and resources, those really resonate with people who feel marginalized or, left behind by the forces of globalization.
Now, the material gives us three really illuminating contemporary case studies set around 2025. Let's dive into those, starting with the climate engineering cover-up. This one sounds particularly intriguing.
It really is a compelling example of how current anxieties can manifest in this kind of thinking. As the source details, this theory basically posits that governments are secretly engaged in large-scale climate manipulation through geoengineering techniques like cloud seeding, stratospheric aerosol injection, and that the condensation trails left by airplanes that they call chemtrails are actually evidence of this secret activity.
Right, those familiar white trails in the sky that some people believe are actually chemical agents being deliberately sprayed. Where did this idea come from, and how has it gained traction recently?
Well, the basic chemtrail idea has been around since the 90s, but it saw a significant resurgence around 2025. This coincided with more extreme weather events and more public discussion about climate intervention strategies. You started seeing viral content on platforms like X and YouTube alleging that things like hurricanes were being intentionally steered. Interestingly, some proponents even started citing declassified military documents about old weather modification tests as supposed proof of ongoing secret operations, even though the science completely debunks that connection.
So it's taking legitimate scientific concepts, twisting them, and then misinterpreting historical documents to try and lend some credibility to the claims. What are the core cultural anxieties this particular theory is tapping into?
It definitely resonates with several deep-seated fears. The potential for catastrophic environmental collapse, certainly. A lack of trust in global institutions like the UN, and just a general unease about human intervention in nature, especially when those interventions are thought to be happening in secret. The source mentions the growth of online communities, often on platforms like Telegram, where people share photos of unusual clouds as supposed evidence, reinforcing their shared belief system.
And what are the actual real-world consequences of a belief system like this? It might seem kind of harmless on the surface to some.
Unfortunately, it does have significant real-world impacts. Meteorologists and climate scientists have faced harassment, even threats. Research facilities working on climate science have been targeted by protests. And perhaps most concerningly, it actively undermines public support for legitimate climate solutions by fostering suspicion and distrust about the motives behind scientific research and policy ideas.
That's deeply concerning. Okay, let's move to the second case study. The digital currency conspiracy. Given all the talk about central bank digital currencies, this one feels very current.
Indeed. This theory revolves around the idea that these central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, that various nations are exploring, they aren't just about modernizing finance. The theory claims they're actually tools for enhanced government surveillance and control, ultimately leading to the end of physical cash and the implementation of social credit systems, maybe like those seen elsewhere.
Okay, and where did this particular narrative gain its momentum?
It really started picking up steam around 2023 as more countries, China, the EU bloc, began actively piloting CBDCs. You saw this surge in online discussions, especially on X and among crypto influencers who often framed CBDCs as a key part of a new world order. They frequently pointed to China's digital yuan as the scary example. There were even instances where these theories got tangled up with religious beliefs, with some drawing parallels to biblical prophecies like the mark of the beast.
Wow. So it's playing on these really deep-seated fears of government overreach and the erosion of financial privacy. And it seems to find a particularly receptive audience within the cryptocurrency community, too.
Precisely. It tapped into anxieties about pervasive surveillance, the potential loss of financial autonomy if cash disappears. For many crypto enthusiasts who often champion decentralized digital currencies specifically as a way to resist government control, CBDCs are seen as the absolute opposite of that vision. The source mentions online forums like RNOCBDC, where people are actively organizing against these initiatives, circulating petitions, calling for boycotts.
And what kind of real-world impact is this having? Is it making a difference?
It's certainly contributing to significant public pushback against CBDC pilot programs, which could potentially slow down or complicate efforts to modernize financial infrastructure. It's also worsening distrust in central banks and government financial bodies, leading some people to take what they see as protective measures, like hoarding physical cash or investing in, highly volatile decentralized cryptocurrencies.
Okay, our third case study, the AI takeover agenda. Considering the incredibly rapid advancements we're seeing in artificial intelligence, this one also feels particularly timely and maybe a bit unnerving.
It definitely resonates with very contemporary anxieties. This theory posits that there's a shadowy elite secretly developing advanced AI with the ultimate goal of subjugating humanity. This could be through widespread job replacement, or maybe even direct mind control via sophisticated neural interfaces. The source mentions specific advancements, like XAI's Grok 3, as things believers often point to as evidence that this agenda is unfolding right now.
So it's tapping into our collective sci-fi nightmares almost about AI becoming too powerful and turning against us. How did this particular narrative gain traction?
It really started to coalesce in the early 2020s as AI shifted from being mostly a theoretical concept to something much more tangible in everyday life. By 2025, after a series of high-profile demos of advanced AI capabilities, it gained significant momentum. You saw a proliferation of viral content, often on X, depicting the supposed technocratic cabal linked to prominent figures and organizations, amplified massively through short-form video platforms like TikTok.
And what specific cultural fears are really at play here? What's it latching onto?
Primarily, I'd say it's the fear of widespread technological unemployment, the idea that AI will just make human labor obsolete. That's coupled with a more existential anxiety about dehumanization in an increasingly automated world. There are also these deep-seated concerns about the sheer pace of technological innovation outstripping our ethical frameworks, our societal readiness. The source mentions online communities, often on Discord, where people share alleged whistleblower accounts from inside the tech industry, which further fuels the narrative.
What kind of tangible effects are we seeing as a result of this specific set of beliefs?
Well, it's undoubtedly feeding into the ongoing and often very heated debates around AI ethics and the need for strong regulations. It's also fostering a significant amount of misinformation about what current AI can actually do. Some people believe in near future scenarios involving AI mind reading or autonomous control, which obviously complicates public understanding of the technology and can lead to unnecessary fear or resistance to potentially beneficial applications.
It's both fascinating and a little unnerving to see how these contemporary conspiracy theories really do hold up a mirror to our deepest societal anxieties. Now, the material also digs into the sort of double-edged sword nature of these conspiracy communities. On one hand, they offer belonging, but on the other, they can be incredibly isolating and, frankly, harmful.
That's such a crucial point to understand. While these communities can provide much needed emotional support and a sense of shared identity, especially for people feeling marginalized, they also carry these significant risks tied to insularity and the constant reinforcement of often harmful beliefs.
Like that danger of becoming so deeply entrenched within the community's specific worldview that any information from the outside, anything dissenting, is just automatically rejected.
Exactly. The QAnon movement is a really stark illustration of this. Despite numerous failed predictions, countless debunked claims, the core beliefs just persist within that community. Followers often just reinterpret events to fit their overarching narrative. This level of entrenchment can put immense strain on personal relationships with family, friends, anyone outside the belief system.
Absolutely. And the consequences can stretch far beyond just individual beliefs, can't they? The
Yeah.
material highlights some pretty serious real-world impacts.
It absolutely does. The January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, which was fueled in large part by false claims of widespread election fraud, serves as this very stark reminder of how these theories can incite real-world violence. Similarly, the spread of anti-vaccine conspiracy theories during the COVID-19 pandemic unfortunately contributed to lower vaccination rates and, sadly, preventable deaths. It demonstrates the very tangible, negative consequences these beliefs can have.
So yeah, this isn't just about abstract disagreements over ideas. It can have truly damaging societal effects. Now, shifting focus a bit to why these beliefs are so persistent. The material delves into the complexities of human behavior. It suggests it's not simply a matter of people lacking information or critical thinking skills.
That's a really key insight. There are fundamental psychological needs at play here. The human desire for meaning, for instance, often leads us to seek out patterns and explanations, even in random or chaotic events. There's a term for it, apophenia, this tendency to perceive connections in unrelated things. Conspiracy theories readily satisfy this need by providing these grand, all-encompassing
And there's
narratives.
that inherent satisfaction, isn't there? That feeling of maybe intellectual superiority that can come from believing you've uncovered some hidden truth that most people haven't grasped.
Exactly. It can provide a sense of unique insight, making people feel in the know, perhaps even superior in their understanding of world events. Then you have the powerful social dynamics. In an increasingly fragmented, sometimes isolating modern world, particularly after events like the pandemic, these online conspiracy communities offer a strong sense of belonging, of shared purpose. The source even touches on this idea of a kind of gamification of conspiracy research, where people collaborate online to uncover hidden clues, validating their shared beliefs together.
And the broader cultural context seems so vital too. These theories really seem to flourish during periods of significant social and political upheaval, like the 2020s have certainly been.
Absolutely. Times of pandemic, intense political polarization, rapid technological disruption, they create this incredibly fertile ground for conspiracy thinking. These narratives, even if factually wrong, can feel emotionally resonant. They provide a sense of order and explanation in a world that feels increasingly uncertain, chaotic, overwhelming.
So, given all that complexity, the psychological needs, the social dynamics, the cultural context, how do we even begin to address this phenomenon? It feels so deeply rooted.
Well, the material really emphasizes that a nuanced, multifaceted approach is essential. Simply dismissing believers or trying to censor the ideas can often backfire. It can reinforce their sense of being persecuted for holding a forbidden truth. We really need to address the underlying causes that make these theories so appealing in the first place.
And a key part of that, presumably, is rebuilding trust in established institutions, fostering greater transparency from governments, corporations, media.
Precisely. Being more open, more honest in communication, proactively sharing data and information, even acknowledging past mistakes that can go a long way in preempting some of the speculation and suspicion that fuels these theories.
And then there's the absolutely crucial role of enhancing media literacy education, right?
hmm
Equipping people with the critical thinking skills they need to navigate this incredibly complex information landscape we all live in.
Absolutely vital. The source highlights Finland's national media literacy curriculum as a potentially successful model to look at. Providing individuals, especially young people, with the tools to evaluate sources, identify bias, understand how information can be manipulated, that's paramount.
And what about finding constructive ways for people to connect and find that sense of belonging, but outside of these potentially harmful online echo chambers?
That's right. Supporting things like local community groups, civic organizations, fostering positive online communities built around shared interests and constructive dialogue rather than shared misinformation, that can offer those same vital social connections, but in a much healthier and more productive way.
And what about engaging directly with the individuals who hold these beliefs? The material suggests trying an empathetic approach.
Yes, attempting to understand and maybe even address the underlying fears and anxieties that might be driving their beliefs, rather than just attacking the claims head on, can sometimes be a more effective starting point for dialogue. It's not easy, but it's often more productive.
And finally, there's the really thorny issue of the role of social media platforms themselves. Should they be taking more responsibility for regulating the spread of misinformation?
Yeah, that's a deeply complex and often highly controversial area. The source suggests that exploring adjustments to algorithms, maybe prioritizing credible sources, perhaps demoting content that's demonstrably false, could be one potential avenue. But it also acknowledges the very significant concerns around censorship and freedom of expression. It's a difficult balance to strike.
So it really sounds like there's no single magic bullet, no easy solution here. It's more like a combination of strategies that address all the different factors at play.
Precisely. It requires a really comprehensive approach, one that acknowledges the psychological, the social, and the informational dimensions of this whole phenomenon.
Well, this has been a truly illuminating deep dive into the intricate world of conspiracy theories. It's so clear they're far more than just isolated, quirky beliefs. They really serve as this powerful lens through which we can understand fundamental human needs, the anxieties permeating our culture today, all amplified by the unique dynamics of the digital age.
Absolutely. We've explored how factors like distrust, the allure of simple explanations, those inherent psychological biases we all have, the deep-seated need for meaning and belonging, and of course, the pervasive influence of online platforms, how all of that converges to shape this really complex phenomenon.
And hopefully this exploration has provided you, our listener, with a more nuanced framework for understanding why these narratives hold such sway and what their prevalence truly reveals about ourselves and the world we're living in right now.
It's definitely a multifaceted issue, no easy answers, but gaining a deeper understanding of the forces at work is undoubtedly the crucial first step.
So on that note, here's a final point for you to maybe ponder. Considering these fundamental human desires we've discussed, for both understanding and connection and acknowledging the huge influence of digital platforms, what are the ethical responsibilities that fall upon each of us? In how we critically evaluate information, yes, but also how we share it in this digital age. Going beyond just trying to figure out what's definitively true or false, what are the broader implications of the information we consume and the narratives we choose to amplify? Something to think about.